Welcome to the next session of the day, NFT-based games, spotting the value amidst hype. 2021 turned out to be the breakout year for non-fungible tokens, or much better known as NFTs. And we are already expecting to see a huge rise in their popularity this year. As per a Deloitte research, NFTs for sports in India alone will generate over $2 billion in 2022, which is about double the figure for 2021. While sports and Bollywood are already a popular category for NFTs in India, there's also a massive inclination for NFT-based games too. NFT games in India provide an opportunity for gamers to generate an income, something that the traditional gaming ecosystems could not offer previously. Gaming firms in India have begun exploring ways to incorporate non-fungible tokens into games and esports, and also develop new games that will run on blockchains to cash in on the mass movement around the domain. So, without wasting any time now, let us hear from the industry experts, leaders, on how the market for NFT-based games is shaping in the country. Welcome, everyone. So today I have Mr. Ishan Negi, Chief of Staff, Polygon Studios. Welcome, Ishan.
Yeah, thanks, Devesh, for having me on. Great to be here.
Great. Next, I have Mr. Nitin Sharma, General Partner and Co-founder, Antler India. Welcome, Nitin.
Hi, thanks, Devesh. Nice to be here.
And finally, I have Luke Gnuvecki, Founder, Metaverse. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks, Devesh. Great to be here with everyone here.
Great. Glad all of you could take out some time and come for this discussion. So my first question is open to everyone. So like I mentioned, that Deloitte research, which has identified India as $1 billion sports entertainment NFT market, how do you see in overall Indian NFT market evolving in the country in the next 5 years? Nitin, let's begin with you.
So I think of course the interesting thing here is a confluence of things happening, right? Mm-hmm. With NFTs is one element that makes sort of Web3 come alive, and Web3 is essentially a set of things which makes this idea of a metaverse come alive. So I think that the future is very exciting for anyone working in these areas. Now, specifically, what it means for NFT gaming, I think I would generally divide it into, IP-based games, which is the examples you gave of cricket or Bollywood as a starting point. Maybe there is more original Indian IP that gets used in these games. And second, perhaps games where NFTs are in-game assets, but they're not linked to any external IP. So it may not be a Virat Kohli card in some game, but it might be a different cricket game where a stroke or a cover drive is an NFT, let's say. Right. I think that for me the bullishness is actually, it's both of those categories could be interesting. I don't think that we would have the same kind of addictive behavior in India around these things as sometimes people draw the comparison with Top Shot, basketball or baseball in the US, or so rare in Europe, where the ownership and the behavior of trading cards, etc., is very culturally deep. So for me, I think India NFT-based gaming will probably take the first category, IP-based gaming, probably grow, but not in the same way as in some other countries. Some very original in-game asset, new kinds of games created for India where NFTs are in-game assets could be very interesting. And then there's lastly the whole element of completely new games where there's a new play-to-earn model built in India. I think we have to also understand what regulations would mean, because it is actually impossible to imagine something very mainstream without being addressed by regulation. But I think in a medium term, I do believe that some interesting P2E economies could be quite big in India.
Ishan, your view, how do you see the overall, NFT market growing in India in the next, let's say, 5 years from now?
Right. So, I agree with a lot of points that Nitin touched upon, right? I also wanted to touch upon the fact that, the regulations are a pretty big gray area, right, currently. So it's sort of a big bother. And in terms of onboarding of a lot of mainstream folks in India, it's a big hassle right now, right? For example, if you're able to, in an ideal state, right, if you're able to purchase NFTs using UPI, Google Pay, right, I think nothing quite like it, right? But I think we have a lot of partners whom we are working with at Polygon, who mentioned the fact that regulations are a big hassle and a big bottleneck so far, right? So I think, of course, NFTs play a huge role in community development and revenue generation and being part of games, right? But at the same time, you need to also have a look at the tooling side of things, right? Because Web3 as an industry is not quite there yet in terms of user experience, right? In fact, experience like wallet onboarding, experiences like bridging, they are some of the most, uh, I would say, not really the best of user experiences that far, right? So a lot of focus also has to be put in terms of developer tooling that will make the next wave of great NFT projects, not just in India, but globally, whether they are games or whether they are creator first economies or whether they are, let's say a music streaming platform, right? We just have to make sure that we are at that stage where all the developer tools are necessary. And for a country like India, right, where even though the penetration of smartphones is huge, at the same time, literacy needs to be built around NFTs at a more grassroots level, right? Currently, when you look at, there's a few projects, I'm sure, I'm connected with a lot of Antler projects as well. So a lot of them are doing great work in Web3 community development. At the same time, when you look at it from a top-down approach, a lot of what brands and IPs are doing are they're just trying to, sort of figure it out along the way. I mean, no one has any idea about what is probably going to work and what is probably not going to work. So it's just going to take a lot of trial and error, whether it's a bottom-up or a top-down approach. So, but yeah, I mean, the NFT space in India is booming. A lot of things are happening. The energy is great. So pretty bullish about that.
Luke, so coming to you, rather than looking at the Indian market, what makes people very bullish about the NFT market in Europe? Probably I was thinking if you can give a view about that, since you're placed in that market. So it would be great for our audiences to understand from your perspective of how the overall NFT domain is there in Europe.
Thanks for having me. I'm here to represent Game On as well. I would start by saying that the blockchain gaming activity has actually grown on a global scale by 2,000% versus the previous year. And if you look and zoom in at the specific NFT gaming market within the NFT sector, 20% of the volume were of the entire volume of the NFT sales in 2021 were actually gaming related assets. And if you look then at the sort of crypto wallet activity, almost 50%, 48, 49, I can't remember the stat, was from the actual activity for wallets from games. So we can see that crypto Web3 gaming is a global phenomenon, which is driven by this, everyone wants to play and have a great gaming experience. And if you add some economies on top of that, which we can monetize your time that you spend on a game, then obviously it creates a powerful value proposition for the users. I agree with what Ishan said. I think the biggest challenge at the moment in Europe and across the globe is the UX. Gamers just want to go and play the game. They don't want to spend 25 steps on going through setting up a wallet and getting the first funds in. So there's definitely a lot of projects who are trying to solve that problem. And even looking at India before this call, I was trying to dig out some of the latest stats and how fast the Indian market is growing. And it's really exciting to see the fast growth for the last few years. And I think last year was very big in terms of the growth in the market, which is now about $1 billion USD worth of gaming industry. And again, like high penetration of mobile devices, mobile first population. It has some challenges as well for how you can make games available on the App Store, so you can use them for play to earn. As we know, Apple are very kind of platformistic. They want to lock you down and maybe charge on your in-app purchases there. So there are some challenges to be solved, but the growth is definitely happening, and we can see that with the amount of web gaming projects. If you look globally, Europe, US, and in Asia as well, there's about 350 blockchain games in development now, with about 500 plus released so far. And that may not be the complete list based on the statistics I've seen. So it's definitely on the rise, but there are a lot of challenges that have to be solved by builders and entrepreneurs at the moment.
Interesting. So coming to you, Ishan, do you think, right kind of investments are happening in the NFT based games? As Luke mentioned, that the ecosystem is really huge, when we're looking at NFT based games worldwide, and there are over 500 blockchain game creators present out there. So are there right investments being made in the NFT based games in India?
I would say that it's too early to say, right? I mean, when you look at numbers, right, I think most gaming VCs globally and even in India, they mention gaming VCs specifically, right? They mention that almost 50 to 90% of the deal flow that they are looking right now in gaming involves games that are utilizing blockchain in some capacity, right? So we are at that point where I don't feel like we are at that point yet where we are looking at Web3 as just another stack in the technology stack, right? Or just another component. I think we are still at that point where we are still deciphering or looking at Web3 as sort of a totally new innovation out there. So it's too early to say what the investments will be like. Having said that, right, I think some of the founders, some of the projects that we have spoken to, they look really promising. They have aggressive roadmaps in terms of timelines and their deliverables, and they seem to have a really strong team with proven backgrounds building it up, which has been the trend across the gaming space globally, right? A lot of AAA game studios are now seeing amazing talent start their own gaming studios, and specifically for blockchain gaming, right? So the talent exodus in this space is definitely high in terms of game design, game development. Cannot question that. Now, how the blockchain gaming space as a whole evolves is a totally different ball game, right? Because it involves not just game design, but also your financial components like tokens, supply, demand, and whatnot, right? So while a lot of people are now touting that play to earn is essentially dead, and now is the time when play and earn will start taking it over, and to an extent they believe that as well. So they want to make sure that whatever the teams that are developing those games have those developers have the best interest in heart as far as games are concerned. And yeah, there's some pretty strong teams even in India that we have been speaking. So we are really bullish on a few different projects globally and in India. So some of them might work, some of them may not work for XYZ reason, but love the energy anyway, right? I think we are seeing the right sort of talent flow into this space and building. I mean, you can't really uh, unless you try, you can't really be successful and you can't fail, which is, the best thing to out
Absolutely,
there.
absolutely.
I just like to, I think I echo all of that. I just to add to that, right? Like in other areas of Web3, this is a new way to look at the opportunity set for Indian founders, for example, right? So if your question is like Indian found, so just like in the case of Polygon, for example, right? The world's best infrastructure for scalability built out of India. So if you just take the same lens and say, okay, gaming, the tooling that's needed from, specific wallets that are meant for gamers, right? Maybe they want a different wallet experience, interoperability across various metaverses, um, you know, maybe different ways of valuing game NFTs, maybe different ways of doing DeFi transactions on top of game NFTs. So these are interesting problems where Indian talent and some of the things are getting funded. And it's not just taking an India view. The view that you're taking is you build in India, but you're building infrastructure for the world.
Correct.
And so that is one element. The another element of that is if you look at the evolution of games and the opportunity for games in India in general, most of the games that had really high sort of DAUs or engagement DAU MAUs typically were not Indian games. They were essentially the Angry Birds all the way to Subway Surfer kind of games, and we've not had sort of a really unique Indian IP built out. And so you can now flip it and say, because in Web3 the distribution is not controlled by the same players, and the publishing and that cycle is different. So you could also have the argument that someone starting in India as a blockchain game could actually do really well on a global scale, not just the infrastructure part, but the actual game itself. So, the reason that, and I'm just speaking from a VC perspective, is because for exceptional people, the gaming part of the Web3 ecosystem, it's a fantastic opportunity. I think it is still very true that we have a dearth of talent when it comes to the creative aspects of game design. And now with Web3, you have one more layer, like Ishan mentioned. It used to be hard enough to make great games and great storytelling and game economics and game operations. And now on top of it, you also have tokens. So, but it also creates an opportunity, right? Because it's Indian talent is starting at the same starting point is people outside.
So it's more like the level playing field is the same.
Exactly.
Right. So Ishan, coming back to you, what's like the difference between Web 3.0 games and the Web 2.0 games? It's a very basic question, but wanted to understand this.
Essentially, the argument here is around ownership, right? I think that is pretty much the most fundamental level out there. I mean, you can have a skin on Fortnite, but when the game goes bust, you can't really use that. Or let's say if you want to capitalize and sell it to someone else outside the game for usage in another game, right? That is pretty much out there. Now, all of this is facilitated by blockchain technology, right? Which is by itself touted as very decentralized. At the same time, immutable. People cannot delete anything. It stays on forever. You maintain an NFT, it stays there forever unless you have a burn contract or other such mechanisms, which is quite rare. So essentially with Web3 games, right, I think ownership is probably the best aspect to go here. Whatever you own, that is particularly yours. No one can take it. It's platform agnostic, it's game agnostic. And over time, right, with Web3 gaming, I think the ideal end state is, interoperability. Let's say if I'm playing FIFA, I have a, FIFA Ultimate Team card of, let's say, Mbappe. I would like for it to be useful in, let's say, another game like Football Manager, in case, we have a Football Manager version in Web3. So I think interoperability and ownership is typically what sort of, exemplifies what Web3 is all about. I mean, there's of course components around the financial aspects of it, but those ultimately trickle down from these both aspects of, interoperability and ownership. I think that's where we are.
Oh, right. Interesting. Luke, coming to you, what are the key drivers, of the, for growth for NFT-based games in the European market? And what do you think will be the key drivers for growth, in the Indian market? That's the second part of the question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would just start by saying, and leading up to what Ishan has just mentioned about Fortnite versus Roblox, I think definitely the true digital ownership, which is really enabled by the NFTs and the blockchain technology under the hood. It's what makes Web3 gaming unique in a way. So it's also for the gamers, but also I'd like to approach this from the kind of creative point of view, where we know that there's a lot of games who thrive because of the user-generated content. We've got the Roblox and ecosystem, Minecraft, and the Web2 gaming. With the problem with those is that if I want to create some virtual assets or skins in those games which are locked, and I'm at the mercy of that company to pay me for that skin. So, for example, in Roblox, if you sell your digital item, or as a developer, you produce a mini game where you sell products, you get charged 60 to 70% of the fees. There's a huge amount of money being taken out of creators' pockets, and they have to pay, design services, development. And what Web3 gaming also enables is that any creator that contributes or creates content for the game, they can monetize that content without any centralized intermediary. And most of the fees are it's very minimally extractive fees. That's about 2.5 to maybe 10% max. Plus, you can have royalties on future resales, which is a new paradigm in creator assets creation. And I think the future of Web3 gaming will be those who will embrace this sort of UCG, UGC in a Web3 matter. As far as the growth is concerned, and by the way, for Web2 gaming, 5% of users only buy in-game items in Roblox, which is a huge amount of very, very small amount of users out of those millions of users playing it, yet they generate $3.2 billion revenue every year. So that's a huge amount of money being spent, and most of that money is being taken by those centralized companies. And of course, they provide a great experience. I mean, Fortnite is a great game for sure, but I think for creators, and Web3 enables that on a much better scale, so you can really monetize your creations as a creator, but also as a games developer, you get much bigger cut of your development. And for growth, I think there's lots of different things. I think what we're seeing now is the metaverse is this big thing that's really fostering the investments into the metaverse. And I think you already mentioned, you asked a question about how much investment is being put into hello? I think it's still sitting. Yeah, so it's I think in Q1, $2.5 billion have already been invested into blockchain gaming. And a lot of that is fueled, as I see it, from this last year, and obviously a lot of the great work that the Polygon studios and the Polygon team are doing with the gaming industry. But also we see a mainstream attention from brands and game studios into gaming. And that started with Meta, Facebook rebranding into Meta, with like some AAA studios like Ubisoft embracing NFTs. We're yet there to see the sort of true like AAA games that really deliver value and have a great sort of user experience, but it's in the right path. One thing I would say that's probably challenging a bit is that a lot of the Web3 games are trying to just to slap a token economy on top of it, and or let's have a token without even thinking through that it's the entire ecosystem that has to function. And for that reason, sometimes it collapses, it gets extorted, and people just run away with money. But I think the winning projects are those who embrace the play to earn, and maybe call it a play and earn, where the fun is the first thing. Ultimately, like I said, 5% of Fortnite players pay. Most of the people play for free. So people want to play games for free. Money isn't always the most important thing for them, but if it helps, it's obviously a good thing. So I think the key thing for growth of the Web3 gaming is focusing more on a play and earn sort of section, where the fun is more important than the financial side. And of course, if you can balance the two very well, you can have a very great ecosystem and game that brings a lot of joy, engagement, and also incentivization for their time to users.
Interesting. You talk like a creative genius on this side, like an advertising guy. The fun part is more important than the financial part. Nitin, do you concur with Luke's views? I mean, like, on what will be the key drivers for the growth for the NFT gaming in the Indian market?
No, I think those were great points. And I think I just would underline that, everyone sort of intuitively knows that gaming will be probably most likely what takes Web3 to the masses, right? When you think of when will 1 billion people be using Web3 in a real sense, probably will be the beachhead application will be gaming. And that idea has been around for some time. And one of the things that even ERC 721 is it's not a new thing, right? But one of the things that was keeping a lot of the mainstreaming of blockchain games was, I think, as Luke pointed out, that the large giants of the gaming space had not woken up to it. And I think what has happened in the last 12 months is, on one hand, you've got the likes of Polygon Studios and more Web3 native platforms making investments on the gaming media side. And on the other hand, you've gotten the traditional Web2 giants of gaming wake up and realize that this is most likely the future. And so you everything from the Microsoft acquisition of Activision to the Meta rebranding, etc. I think what this collectively means is there's going to be, in the next 1 or 2 years, a huge amount of investment and talent globally into making better games, and that's one part. And the second part, as has been pointed out by, I think, all three of us, is the tooling around it. And I think there are plenty of people working on it. So I think it's a matter of, maybe 1 or 2 years before something breaks out beyond the P2E element, right? Because P2E was really about, like, COVID gave the world too much time and too much money. And so you had a lot of underemployment, and especially in Southeast Asia, India, for example. And it was the ripe environment for something like P2E to take off, because you have millions of people figuring out what to do and find some, essentially, arguably a version of a pyramid scheme to make money. But that's not sustainable, right? And even on the other side, with things like card games or IP-related NFT, there is so much speculation right now. Most of the people who are buying these cards, let's say a few of the celebrities in India have launched their NFT cards, etc. Most of that is not real fans, but just speculators. So at some point, when it's actually real gamers, and the high overlap between like real gamers and people who are holding these card assets, etc., I think that'll also get the ecosystem going. So I think it's a huge opportunity. Maybe for me personally, it's more about Indian talent building for the world rather than just the gaming opportunity in India.
Can I just quickly add to what Nitin has? I think it's an important point about how gaming has always embraced new technologies. So when I was a teenager, a young guy, like in the 90s, obviously I would play computer games with my friend. There was no instant online gaming. It was just you have to bring a PC to your flat, to your friend's house or flat. But with the emergence of the internet, we had new genres such as MMOs emerging, which were not possible before. We had Battle Royale, which wasn't possible without the internet. We also had new business models such as free to play, and then in-app purchases when you want to pay for extra items. And virtual goods trading and purchases, all those things wouldn't be possible without the internet. So just an example how the gaming industry embraced the internet to redefine itself. And there's, last but not least, you have this new concept of complementary behaviors such as game streaming, which is a new industry in its own way, where you have influencers and creators. So we're going to see a similar thing in Web3. Again, there will be things like sort of DeFi or GameFi applications for gamers, and the whole industry will just embrace this new wave of innovation, which I think it's exciting and helps to move Web3 and blockchain to even further advancement and development and more mainstream.
Ishan, Nitin made a point that that large giants like Polygon and other gaming giants, they are believing into the future, which is the metaverse. So I mean, like, what are the the key belief that you have in your mind that the future is the NFT gaming, the metaverse, it's the future? What are the key reasons for this belief?
I think just when you look at technology, right, I think even Luke mentioned from a creator side. Now, whether that creator side channels their creation through their own means like art, or whether it's through games, right? I think technology was never, until this point, until Web3 came into limelight, I think we never had technology that supported players, or that supported creators, right? That supported a very bottom-up approach. So I think that is where we are at, right? So now all of a sudden we have a technology stack that sort of provides direct access, complete royalties, right? Complete ownership of your assets now, whether it's for users or it's for creators, right? Either way, right? It provides that. Again, having said that, right, I think even going forward, I think even for AAA studios or gaming studios in India, I think it will take some time before they start to break out of their own systems or their own game economies or their own distribution channels. There's less incentive for them to do so, but at the same time, we'll see over the course of the next couple of years how things develop, right? Like Nitin mentioned, a lot of things will start getting clearer as we define it over time. But to be honest, like, not every game has to be a blockchain game. That's why I think we have to absolutely take that into consideration. Of course, being part of the Web3 family, being part of the community, right? You're super bullish on this technology, and we are. But at the same time, you have to be a little more realistic, right? Not every game is meant to be on the blockchain. Not every user base or every game's user base wants their game to be on the blockchain, right? So all of these things will start to develop over time. And when it comes to the metaverse, right, I think metaverse, what is it? It's just your digital environment, your digital twin, right? And with their own simulations, which it has to be interconnected, it has to be lively, right? For us to be able to have it mimic real life activities, right? And it has to be interoperable. So that's where the tooling comes in, right? So I think that is where a lot of, maybe Luke he's the master in the metaverse space. A lot of amazing projects are building amazing protocols that makes, that makes a lot of interoperability possible at this point in time. And slowly we'll start to see, how those games and those metaverse start to gel together to create better UGC and better, in metaverse games. So that's pretty much a very bullish area for us, at least at Polygon Studios.
Interesting. Before I come to the end of the session, Nitin and Luke, I would want you to, share your thoughts on, what's the kind of future you see for NFT games in India in the coming, let's say 1 decade.
Oh, they wish if I was smart to predict 1 decade, I would be doing many more things. I think the world's moving so fast that a couple of years is probably the right time frame. So I think number one, I'll repeat what I said. I think some breakout cases will appear in terms of either Indian devs creating tooling, which will become the default in Web3 gaming, or I expect be some breakout games which might even get created in India and go global. I think the Gen Z the Gen Z gaming behavior will certainly skew more and more towards Web3 gaming, and that will not be different in India. I agree, like not all games will be decentralized or on top of NFTs or Web3, but I think the skew will keep moving in that direction because there is that provability, scarcity, and interoperability that comes with assets. And I think, interestingly, even the world of esports, the current esports folks will also, that's not a small segment. That's 250 million people who regularly follow esports. I'm also curious as to how they will interact with Web3. Some of it is that, the same gamers will want to also have their own communities. And so some things like that will also happen in the intersection of, esports and the new world of NFTs. And finally, I don't think, while I don't claim expertise around the Axie SLP economy necessarily, but I think not that, but some new version of this P2E ecosystem will be real in a country like India, and it will keep going through some legal challenges, just like fantasy sports are still going through in India with some back and forth between the legal system. But I think eventually I do anticipate there will be something that will become mainstream.
Interesting. So you think, that today probably it's not the right time to talk about the regulatory framework for NFT games in India. Is that the point? Is it the right time?
So I think no, that's a really good point actually. Yeah, I think the regulatory part is behind the curve on this because we are still dealing with understanding digital assets in general.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people in gaming, for example, have made the point that NFTs should not be treated as crypto assets because there is a specific purpose. They're inside a closed ecosystem. A lot of people have said that they should be taxed differently. So I personally don't think that I think it's a derivative discussion, right?
Correct.
To me, that seems like something which might take, my best guess is like 2 or 3 years to get some clarity on how the government sees this. So I think right now in the next couple of years is just experimentation, building, and like we discussed, tooling and infrastructure is what probably people should focus more on.
Right. So Luke, your thoughts on how do you see the growth of NFT based games in India?
Yeah, a lot of that depends, of course, on how much startup investment is going through, and there are lots of different projects happening at the moment. Even before this call, I was trying to go through this massive list of all blockchain games, which is circulating in also Web3 communities. I think it will be great to see more teams dox themselves, like coming out public where they're from originally. By the way, not every blockchain gaming team docs themselves for various reasons. It could be some like regulations and financial. Would be great just to shout about because there's so much great talent, and with this growing, I think India is the second biggest internet consumer in terms of the number of internet users. So there's a lot of Gen Zs are very much like into crypto and Web3. They understand this natively. Gamers understand Web3 natively as well. They have it in their blood in a way. So I think bringing the young, fresh talent into those new startups and investing into those startups is a key thing here as well. And again, I think that was mentioned at the very beginning of this call, which is crypto is a global phenomenon. You can create a game in your small town somewhere, and you can be famous tomorrow all around the world and used by millions of users because it's a great game. It generates some value, and in a Web3 sense, it incentivizes you for your time, for example. So, and we've seen that with Axie, which originate from like Southeast Asia as well, and even like if you look at the gaming market, I think Asia is a second or if not the first biggest contributor of gamers. So there's definitely a lot of talent. It's just having the right investment in place, bringing the right mindset of people, and creating great games and experiences there.
Great. And finally, Ishan, what's your view? Because you're the one of the key stakeholders of this entire ecosystem who is backing these NFT games, putting the muscle behind them, putting the money behind them. So how do you see, this market shaping?
Well, like we've discussed, right? I think a lot of different things here. So typically, just like all of these Gen Zero Web3 games have been pretty much just gamification of financialization so far, right? I mean, these weren't really enjoyable games. These weren't games that you'd go just for the sheer fun of it. These were just there because it's easy money for people, right? You buy a horse, you just race it, and bang, you have money in your pocket. But essentially, right, what's happening here is, like we mentioned, right, a lot of talent exodus happening, a lot of great developers, technically legacy studios are looking at blockchain games. So what I'm really expecting now to see is like what Luke mentioned, play and earn is going to be taking much more of a center stage now, where there's more focus on enjoyment of the games with elements of crypto being at the side, right? That's where we are. And at the same time, right, I think Nitin also pointed out esports is very big. We have guilds in India almost. We have IndieGG, right, which is the Indian chapter of IGG. So we at this point we also want to make sure that, okay, whatever games we have currently in Web3, we want to make sure that the large plethora of Indian gamers that we have in the country, they have exposure to all these games as well at an early stage right now, irrespective of whatever the level of those games are. So guilds, esports, and play and earn, I think really bullish on these things for the Indian market.
Great, gentlemen. Thank you very much for sharing your insights, on how the future of NFT-based games will be shaping in India. And we had some really interesting points, while Nitin mentioned about, how regulatory framework will take a couple of years, to stabilize and to shape up, how things will grow. And while Ishan mentioned upon, the kind of investments that will be going behind, and Luke shared a global perspective by bringing in how the European market is growing in terms of the NFT space, and how he looks at the Indian market. So thank you very much for taking out time today and being a part of this panel. Thank you very much, Ishan, Nitin, and Luke. Lovely speaking to you.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you.